Hey guys, it's the Trip Keeper here. I want to show my appreciation to all of you. I'm gonna do a little contest where you can win a $25 Visa gift card, and all you have to do are these 3 steps. First, like this video and subscribe if you're new. Second, follow me on Instagram, and if you have already, then that's great. Lastly, on Instagram, create a post shouting out my channel. You can either screenshot one of your favorite videos or do whatever you think would be cool. In the caption put, "Go watch Tales from the Trip on YouTube, hashtag the Trip Keeper." Make sure you use the hashtag the Trip Keeper, or your submission will go unnoticed. That's all you have to do to win. If this goes well, I might do more contests in the future and make the prizes even bigger. This is just a test run, so I hope it all goes well. A winner will be chosen at random, so everyone has an equal chance to win. Thank you, and enjoy the video.
Welcome to the world of Tales from the Trip.
I have taken many psychoactives in my time, but never had I dreamed that one of my most intense experiences would come from caffeine. A friend and I had just started to come down off of smoking a huge blunt, and we'd heard that taking a whole bunch of no-dos directly after starting to come down off of weed would produce an interesting effect. We acquired a bottle of no-dos, and I took 7 while my friend had 5. After about an hour, my friend and I had an extreme urge to run around and basically goof off, and the experience at first was very similar to speed. I felt great, very strong and energetic. After running around, and I mean really running, for a half an hour or so, I felt a bit dizzy and had to sit down. A 10-minute rest seemed to make me feel good again, so we piled into a car and I experienced a strange sensation of doom, as if the car was going 700 miles an hour and was going to crash. That effect quickly wore off and life took on a very humorous quality and I couldn't seem to stop laughing. About 20 minutes later, my friend and I sat down outside of a McDonald's and suddenly my hands locked up into fists. I couldn't move my arms or legs, and I became somewhat frightened as my body seemed to go through periods of extreme pressure. My vision became a blinding yellow, and after everything but the intense color had disappeared, I passed out. I awoke lying on the sidewalk and found that the only sound I could hear was my heartbeat, which seemed about 100 times faster than normal. I couldn't move any part of my body except for my eyes, and I spotted my friend sitting nearby, looking worried. She appeared to be talking to me, but I couldn't hear anything that she was saying, only my heartbeat. I became even more frightened as the blinding light returned, and all I could hear was my pounding heart. I was convinced that I was dying, and I didn't realize that I was crying until my senses somewhat returned, and I found that I was wailing rather loudly, and my friend was shaking me. I collapsed once more and awoke to see my friend standing over me, looking hysterical. She was very frightened and wanted to go back to my house to calm down. I stood up very slowly and found that I couldn't talk at all. All I could seem to concentrate on was slowing my breathing because my heart rate was faster than I'd ever heard it, and I still thought that I might be dying. My friend helped me walk, in very slow motion it seemed, to my apartment complex, where I had an extreme urge to sit on a bench in a small park nearby. I tried to talk, and my words came out in a whisper and seemed very slurred. My breathing and heartbeat were so rapid that I was shaking harder than I ever had before. I had no sense of time and kept repeating that if I were allowed to live, I'd be nicer to everyone and never take drugs again. I soon found myself lying on the ground in front of the bench, speaking gibberish. My friend appeared to be totally normal while I went on and on, talking about alien planets and things like that in a very serious manner. I began to see trails on random objects like the moon, my shoelaces, and strands of my friend's hair. My friend offered me a drink that she had gotten from McDonald's, but I wouldn't have anything to do with caffeine, which by this time I was convinced it was made by Satan himself. After what seemed like hours, we got up and went to my apartment, where I sat down in front of the TV and told my friend in a loud, commanding voice, "Make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich." I became lost in watching a home shopping channel, and when my friend returned with the PB&J, I made her put it on the carpet next to me so I could watch the jewelry show uninterrupted. I started to come down from the strange trip I had been on, which lasted in all about 4 hours, and when I finally got my breathing back to normal, I found that my stomach felt as if it was filled with cement. I ran to my bathroom and proceeded to vomit mucus and then dry heave from about 3 a.m. until 2:30 in the afternoon, when I passed out. I awoke in my closet, completely nude and surrounded by vomit, so I started to look for a change of clothing, and as if by magic, I guess I'd passed out again, I found myself lying in my shower, dripping wet and cold as hell. My stomach hurt so much for the rest of that day that my friend had almost called 911 due to my incoherent wailing, excessive vomiting, and random acts of showering. The final count was somewhere around 12 showers altogether. I couldn't eat or drink anything until about 7 p.m. that night, and I was still very shaky and a little delirious. I was confused because my friend had seemed mostly normal while I had such an intense trip. She only took about 2 less no-dos than I did. I have an almost non-existent caffeine intake, and maybe this is why it affected me the way it did. Even with that in mind, it seems highly strange to me that caffeine could produce such an effect. The trip was vaguely similar to a very bad trip on LSD, though the feelings of my body shutting down and the illness I experienced afterward have never happened to me before on any drug, LSD included. I wouldn't recommend that anyone do that much caffeine, as I genuinely felt like I was gonna die. It might have just been something to do with me never having any caffeine on a normal basis, but I still wouldn't advise it. Maybe a bit less than the 1400 milligrams I took would produce a more agreeable experience. During the summer of 2004, I was on vacation with my parents and my friend, A, in Maui, Hawaii. I was, and still am, in a state of deep depression. For this reason, I had recently started what is known as self-medicating in the latter part of my junior year of high school. I was having problems such as sleeping, concentrating, and keeping active, all signs of depression, so I decided to try pot. As I found out, it was very efficient with helping my situation and masked my mood. Eventually, I tried cigarettes with the same positive result, and soon I had the mindset that I would try anything that came my way. This moves us to 8 months later. My friend, A, was a particularly good kid and never drank, smoked, or nothing. However, 6 days before, I stole a bottle of alcohol from the ABC store, a Hawaiian version of 7-Eleven. We finally ran dry, and stupid old me needed another fix. I remembered seeing some caffeine pills in the same ABC store the day before and decided to get some. I came up with 2 packages, one of no-dose and one of Vivarin, thinking that each might have different effects. Minutes later, we arrived behind some restaurant in the local plaza, and I proceeded to down 34 pills, 6,800 milligrams, while my friend took 4, though he said he took many more. From what I remember, the time was about 6:30 p.m. We strolled back to the house, expecting to feel the speed-like high. Just then, we ran into 2 hot girls that yelled at us the night before. Like most guys would, we chatted and soon found ourselves sitting with them on the sand, enjoying the sunset. I was talking very fast and feeling hyped up at this point. I told them what we did, and they thought it was stupid and laughed. 20 minutes later, I was having an incredibly hard time talking and couldn't have a complete thought. I would basically say the first word of every sentence that came into my head, which would sound something like, I, who, did you, why, but, didn't, where, obviously making no sense to observers. For about an hour, this continued, and I managed to point to one of the girls' water bottles and ask for some. I drank the whole thing and threw up. She kept filling it and bringing it to me about a dozen times, while her friend kept her arm around my shoulder as I spewed. It was pretty nice of them to say the least, as I missed puking on her by an inch once or twice, even getting a few drops on her hand. Moving on, we somehow made it back to the pool area of the condos that we were staying at and sat down. They said their goodbyes, and I basically just sat there shaking and feeling very dried out. We immediately went back to our room and laid down. It finally dawned on me that my friend A hadn't taken that many, as he fell asleep immediately. A little while later, I heard my parents come home and prayed that they wouldn't come into our room. They didn't, and I soon heard them go upstairs. For the next 4 hours, I lay face up in my bed, wriggling my fingers with my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. I felt that if A fell asleep, that I could too. I shut my eyes to no avail and stayed up thinking in fragments. My heart was beating as if I was running a marathon, and my breathing was heavy and extremely slow. My skin felt like it had needles poking out of it, and I randomly had shock sensations throughout my whole body. My eyes felt very dry as well. I knew I had to vomit to get the shit out of my system, but I wasn't sure if my parents were awake or not. I got very impatient and ran to the bathroom, finding that they were, in fact, asleep. I cupped faucet water into my hands and almost immediately puked in the toilet. I did this an uncountable number of times, as I couldn't hold down very much water without puking it out. I found this to be to my advantage and tried gulping down water as quickly as I could. Every time I did so, yellowish liquid came out of me that tasted unimaginably sour. I dry heaved half the time and sometimes saw black polka dots when I really did so. After about 2 hours of doing this, I knelt down on the floor and must have passed out, because I remember getting up moments later, not remembering what I just did. I went back to my bed and tried desperately to wake A up for help. He didn't want to bother. I lay on the floor shaking and then went back to the bathroom to commence vomiting. I did this all night until 7 a.m. the next morning. I was very uncertain as to whether or not I was going to die, as I half-heartedly wanted to. I wanted to find out what I could do to remedy the overdose and asked my friend to go upstairs and get the laptop from my parents. He did so and plugged it into the phone jack, powered it on, and typed in caffeine overdose on Google. He found a website and read on there that 8,000 milligrams was lethal for an adult weighing X amount of pounds. I immediately start thinking two things. One was that I didn't take 8 grams, and the other was that I could die this morning. He read that an OD requires lots of charcoal consumption and stomach pumping. Using my stupid logic, I decided not to tell my parents since they would be mega pissed and were already drug testing me. So I basically sat cross-legged on the bed, arms crossed around my stomach, rocking myself back and forth in agony, while my friend browsed the internet and my parents went out to eat at a pancake house. I stayed home all day feeling completely intoxicated and couldn't keep anything down. Not cookies, nor water, nor chips. Things only started to get better when I had spaghetti later that night, and it actually settled. The starch must have diluted the poison. The rest of the evening I felt better, just a little jittery and very tired. We even met up with one of the girls from last night later on and talked for a while. The only thing that gives me paranoia to this day is that I might have done permanent damage to my heart, stomach, and brain, even though I talked to a psychiatrist about this and said it likely didn't. Another thing that I remember is that any beverage with caffeine in it tasted bitter and horrible for about the next 4 months. The horror film still plays in my head when I drink coffee. That has been, what will always be, The worst day of my life. That is, of course, if I don't do it again. So I was bored one night and was out of weed, so I decided to try something new. I was just going to go for something at the store, and I already tried DXM and had a pretty bad trip, so I wasn't going to go on that route. I decided on a box of caffeine pills to see how that would be for a change. I first took 4 of the 200 milligram pills with little effect, so I decided to finish off the pack with the last 4. About a half an hour later, I started to feel really bad, so I tried to make myself vomit up what I had taken. I ate right before this, so I had a hard time puking it up. I tried drinking a few cups of water to help it come out. Nothing. I don't remember puking much, but I got a little out of me eventually. This is where the bad part came into play. I guess I was near the front door at one point, and I had a seizure. I remember my mom coming in the door, and I guess I woke up then. Boy, did I feel terrible. I couldn't talk right, see right, and I could barely walk. I stumbled my way to the toilet and puked my guts out. I guess my mom knew something was wrong and called 911 while I was in the bathroom. The next thing I knew, the EMS crew was in my house and led me to the awaiting ambulance. I was still out of it, and the EMS asked for my name and birthday, and I couldn't even remember what it was. I got to the hospital at about 11:30 p.m. where they put me in a room at the ER, and my parents arrived shortly after. I came to a bit then and was still throwing up. I guess I had another seizure sometime while in that room because I woke up some hours later with an IV in me and was in a new room. I spent the next 2 days in observation. I was sore all over from my muscles tightening up on me, but they wouldn't give me any pain pills because they knew I would abuse them. I know now that Zoloft and caffeine do not mix and can cause these seizures. Now I have to wait 6 months to be able to drive again due to state law. Be careful, be safe, don't abuse pills. I never really considered caffeine a drug prior to this experience. I was aware of its addictive capabilities, but when I began to lose control of my body and have a detached mindset, well, then I am in trouble. Let me start from the beginning. My friend took caffeine pills regularly simply because he liked the speedy effects. Because of this, I decided to try them myself. Taking 1 or 2 at first, I soon found out he was right. They were okay. I often felt alert, stayed up later if needed, and I could start my day better with a couple pills rather than brewing coffee. No big deal. I was curious how high my dosage could go. Feeling competitive, as my friend's record was 6, I decided to take 8. The experience started out fairly normal, with moderate shakes in my fingers and feeling very uppity and on the ball. I had eaten a fairly large meal before this experience, maybe 90 minutes prior, but I got the urge to puke regardless. Being very experienced with alcohol, I knew the worst thing I could possibly do is try to hold it back, so I vomited up my entire dinner. This, suffice to say, shocked me. Looking into the toilet bowl, tingly and amazed, I saw everything I ate, but no pills. Every single caffeine pill had somehow beat my dinner through my system. I flushed the toilet, then got a severe urge to go to the bathroom. Then everything began to get frightening. Sitting on the toilet bowl, I first became extremely hot. I felt feverish, and, for fear of crapping on the floor, I took my clothes off while still on the toilet. I grabbed a nearby book and started reading it. The shaking got worse, and it became actually difficult to hold the book. I found myself reading the same lines over and over again. I lost my sense of time and my feet fell asleep. This was normal, but I tried to wiggle my toes and realized that I couldn't. I became nervous. I started to get a pounding headache, and all this time, the need to puke or go to the bathroom did not go away. I dropped the book and clutched my stomach as the shakes took over. I decided to give up on going to the bathroom and put my clothes back on, but I found I couldn't stand up. I was asleep from the waist down and completely certain I would die as the paralysis slowly crept up on my body. I had mental images of my family finding me dead on the toilet like Elvis. My heart began to beat faster and faster. I feared I would have a heart attack. The world appeared to be grainy and pixelated. I felt extremely hot, and I opened the bathroom door to get the air moving. I didn't care if anyone would see me. I threw myself on the floor and waited for my blood to circulate. Eventually, it did. I pulled on my underwear and pulled myself up to a standing position using the sink. I felt shaky and woozy at the same time. I was unable to walk in a straight line like a drunk, and I was incredibly dizzy. I fell on my bed. I looked at my clock and realized that the entire experience took about 6 hours, from taking the pills to laying down on the bed. About 5.5 of those hours were spent sitting on the toilet in pain. I then passed out. I slept for about 2 hours, then got up and went to school as usual. Though the tingling was gone, I had the shakes and mild nausea for the next day, something of a caffeine hangover. Losing control of my body was not cool, but I still take caffeine in liquid form. I took tons of caffeine before this experience, and I had no idea I could lose control of my body like that. I have not taken any pill form caffeine since this incident.